Could Israel really face the specter of civil war after the tension that erupted in East Jerusalem and now the potential of a ground war with Gaza? Arab Israelis and hardline Jews have clashed openly. Motorists beaten unconscious, a pregnant woman sent to hospital, a synagogue torched. Both the country's president and the mayor of the flashpoint town of Lod near Tel Aviv have even used the term civil war. To think that on the heels of Israel's fourth snap election in 2 years back in March, Arab Israelis, who make up more than 20% of the electorate, suddenly emerged as kingmakers. Where does the current crisis leave Israeli politics and Arab citizens, who generally have kept a low profile in previous crises of this magnitude? What consequences if what started off as a standoff over the expulsion of Palestinian families in East Jerusalem continues to spiral? Today in the France 24 debate, we're looking at that spiral. And with us, lawyer and commentator Pascal Markovitz. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Francis.
From Haifa, northern Israel, activist Hayam Tanus of the advocacy group Women Wage Peace. Welcome to the show.
Good evening. Thank you.
And from Tel Aviv, Shlomo Sand, historian, professor emeritus at Tel Aviv University. Thanks for joining us.
Good evening.
The France 24 debate, where you can join the conversation, and you have on Facebook and Twitter, hashtag F24debate. Yes, several hotspots inside of Israel, like Akka in the north, where the rioting has been particularly bad, and Lod, where an Arab Israeli was shot dead Monday. That triggered a reaction. There's been an explosion of anger that resulted most notably in the torching of a synagogue. Lod, an industrial town south of Tel Aviv airport, that's 40% Arab Israeli, with mixed neighborhoods that were up to now peaceful. Correspondent Iris Makler reported for us a short while ago.
I can't hear.
The clashes between Muslims and Jews who live in the same city, on the same street, sometimes in the same building, have been going on now for 2 nights. In Lod, the clashes were extreme last night, despite the fact there was meant to be a state of emergency there. And what the mayor of Lod has warned, he said Israel is on the brink of a civil war. That's how frightened he is by what's happening in his town. And if you think that it's over now, it's certainly not. I've been monitoring social media tonight all day, and there are great fears for what will happen tonight because outsiders come in. Right-wing Jewish groups are bringing in reinforcements to take part in these clashes, Arab groups from around the country, and there's incitement on social media. Come on in and protect us. Come on in, we need you. So they're being bussed in, basically, to have these clashes in these mixed towns. That's a great fear for the police, who are trying to stop them before they get in, but that's not so easy. So there is increased policing tonight, but great fear and no guarantee that we're not going to see these clashes again. We're not going to see burning cars. We're not going to see very badly wounded people. And we're not going to see people, ordinary citizens, terrified, locked in their homes.
Hayam Tanus, what's it like where you are in the north of the country in Haifa?
I didn't hear the question. Please, can you say it once more?
Sure. What is the situation like this evening in Haifa?
Tonight it's a bit quiet, but really, as you mentioned, we had here riots in Haifa. A bunch of our youth from both sides, especially Arabs, who all the time felt unwanted, illegitimate, unloved by the state. So they found a fertile ground in order to express their anger and their frustration. But for our good luck, we could, we could hold the situation, and today it's much better. Here in Haifa, it's a very nice city, which with people from all over, diverse people, Jewish, Arabs, Bahaian, Muslims. We live together, and we have a very good coexistence. And today, most protests in the daytime was in order not to violence, yes to friendship, yes to coexistence. we have also voices who are against, but these bunch of youth who really we can't hold them because as I said before, they are expressing their anger. And from the other side, we have also Jewish youth who also, I think they are from the marginals. They also come, and really we had riots in plenty of cities here in the state. But I think that it will be much better because we have people who are smart enough, who are balanced, as our Rivlin, our not prime minister, anyway. We have voices who say no to violence. Let's sit and let's talk and let's have a dialogue between us. I'm hopeful.
Yeah, you're hopeful for Haifa. We're going to hear from the Israeli Prime Minister, who did issue an appeal for calm, a strong one, after last night's second night of violence. Just to remind our viewers, more than 1 in 5 Israeli citizens are Arabs. It's a report by Ellen Gainsford.
As the conflict escalates between Israeli forces and Palestinian militants, protests have erupted within Israel's Arab community on a scale not seen for 2 decades. But who is this minority group? According to a 2019 census, Arabs make up around 20% of Israel's population. Many are the descendants of Palestinians who remained inside Israel's borders following the 1948 Arab-Israeli War. Their dialect is sometimes called Israeli Arabic, as it shares elements with Hebrew. Most are bilingual, with Hebrew as a second language. Arab Israelis are citizens of Israel, and as such have the right to vote and stand for office. The joint list of Arab majority parties currently has 6 seats in the Knesset and is a growing political force. But the group has faced institutionalized discrimination against it. In 2018, Israel passed a law dubbed the Nation-State Bill, which critics say cemented an apartheid state. It declares that Israel is the historic homeland of the Jewish people, downgrading Arabic to a language with special status, and pledges to assert Jewish settlement efforts, the cause of much ongoing tension. The current surge in violence was sparked by efforts by settlers to evict several Palestinian families from the Sheikh Jarrah neighborhood in East Jerusalem.
Pascal Markovitz, we've had wars between Israel and Gaza several times, 2008, 2009, 2014, now again, right now. We could have another, we'll talk about it more in part 2 of our discussion, another ground war. It's a possibility. But this hasn't been seen in a long time, the clashes, this tension that's mounted. We heard Hayam Tanus tell us how in Haifa there are groups on both sides appealing for calm. Which worries you more, what's going on with Gaza or what's going on between Israeli citizens, the Arabs and the Jews?
I think the situation is more complicated, and what is new is the situation inside Israel. So the situation between the 2 communities. Because the war with Gaza, it's, as you said, we're in Israel, there are some wars, and they know how to deal with it. But the situation inside Israel is new. I think it's encouraged by the Hamas and the Palestinian Jihad Islamic organization, who are terrorist organizations, and now the difference between the last war, which was on 2014, I think, if I remember, and now, the difference is that they want to encourage the terror inside Israel by putting one before one against the other.
Really? Because how much sway do they have with Arab Israelis? We saw Arab Israelis vote in the elections and take part in the political process inside of Israel. Do hardline groups really have a sway over them?
I think so, and also possibility also is due to the report of the Palestinian elections. Palestinian elections should have been fixed to the 22nd of May, and President Mahmoud Abbas decided to report them to a date that we don't know. We don't know why. Well, except that non-officially, I think, he was afraid for him and his organization, the Fatah, to lose these elections. So
Well, why would that matter to Arab Israelis?
Well, Hamas said it's an opportunity for us to have all the population with us by making a demonstration very hard, pretending that the Sheikh Jarrah problem, which is a legal matter dealt by the Supreme
That
Court.
neighborhood of East Jerusalem.
Yes, I think, and it's a legal matter dealt by the Supreme Court, so it's something legal. But they insisted on this and said it's an opportunity for us to, as they said, defend the Al-Aqsa Mosque and take Jerusalem and all the Palestine land.
But you heard Hayam Tanus saying how most of the Arab Israelis that she's speaking with are moderates, and they don't have anything to do with Hamas.
Yeah, that's why I think, and she's right, I think people in 1 or 2 days, I think, they will think of what is the situation, and they have to live together like before, because they are mostly friendly in Haifa, in Akko, or in Lod, or in other cities. They are used to live together, Arabs and Jews, and there is no reason not to live together.
Shlomo San, do you agree?
Not at all. You see, everybody is against violence, and me too. I am against violence. But when violence like this started, we have to ask ourselves, what is the reasons of this ambience of civil war that we are living it 2 nights? And I am afraid that this night also we will see clashes between Arabs and Jews in Israel. Now, today, Bibi Netanyahu say, for example, that there is not a state in the world that will accept that missiles will be put on the capital of a state. I mean, Jerusalem. You know, Hamas sent missiles to Jerusalem. It's true, but he didn't say that is the only capital in the world that more than a third of the population has not any political civic right. You see, Israel annexed Al-Quds in 1967. They don't give automatically Israeli nationality to the population, Arab population in Jerusalem. It's 53 years that people, a few thousand of people, more or less 350,000 people are living in the eternal capital of the Jewish people.
Okay, but then I can ask you, I can therefore ask you, Shlomo, the same question I asked to Pascal. How is this the concern of Arab Israelis?
This is very important because everything, this is the second time in 2000, October, it started with Jerusalem. This time also, it started with Jerusalem about 2 stories. One story is of Sheikh Jarrah. You know, in Sheikh Jarrah, it's an area that was conquered in 1967. They were living there, families, in houses of Jews that owned these houses before 1948. Now the Israeli court, decided to put away these families that living in Sheikh Jarrah because it belonged before 1948 to Jews. Then the Jews living in Sheikh Jarrah said, okay, you want this apartment, you want these houses, give us back the houses, the apartments that we were thrown out in Jaffa and Ramallah. In Ramleh, sorry, not Ramallah. Now, you see, we took a lot of houses, a lot of apartments, and now Israel is asking these apartments that people are living from 1948. This was the first fire of the blow up of the, if you want, a kind of civil war in Israel. Now, I have a lot of Israeli Palestinian, that they are very quiet, my student also. And I think that the reason that this time it's so strong, it's because a part of this population, by the way, 21% of the population is Arab, not 20, 21, and they become more and more Israelis. They occupied more and more posts. They become more and more medicine. They speak much better Hebrew than 20, 30 years ago. But like a paradox, every step that they become more Israelis, they ask more equality. And I am living in a state that is not equal because, for example, my students, Arab students, cannot stand with me singing the national hymn, because the national hymn is singing by Jewish. You know, you have to be a Jew to sing the national hymn. Israel defined themselves as a state of the Jewish in the world, not of its Israeli citizens. And now, with the discussion with my student, Palestinian Israeli student, I feel more and more the last years, the angry against the fact that Israel is not a real democracy, because every democracy is a state that belongs to all the citizens in an equal manner. Israel doesn't belong to the Israeli citizens. Israel is belonging to Jews living in London, New York, and Paris. This is a fact. Now, the reason that this hate become more and more strong is not the propaganda of Hamas. Hamas is not, acting in a very, very clever way. The reason is deep, is the structure of this state that doesn't want to become a real democracy of all its citizens.
Pascal Markovits, let me bring in Pascal Markovits on this. Pascal Markovits, it's true the last few years we've seen this emphasis by Prime Minister Netanyahu on the fact that Israel is a Jewish state. Is that a mistake?
It's a Jewish state, but it's also a real democratic state, and I think it's one of the most democratic states in the region. Do you think a democratic state will not have some minorities in the Knesset, in the parliament? We have three Arab parties in the parliament, legally and democratically elected. We have also ministers, we have soldiers, we have a lot of institutions directed by people from who are not Jews. So it is, in fact, a real democratic state, not an apartheid state. I don't know if you remember that President Moshe Katsav was convinced of law and sentenced by a judge who was an Arab Israeli judge. And nobody wanted to make his decision in opposition. He has the right because he was the judge. No one wanted to contest this. So I think I'm sorry, Mr. San, but I don't agree with you. And we are well known about this, but I think you can't find another state in the region who has a lot of such democratic statements.
Sorry. I compare myself to England, to France, to the United States as a liberal democracy. I don't compare myself to Egypt, to Iraq, and to Jordan. Now, I ask a simple question.
I don't either.
If tomorrow Britain will define themselves as a state of only Anglo-Saxon that are living in Britain, it will be a democratic state. If France will define themselves tomorrow, not the republic of all the French citizens, but only about the Gallo-Catholic citizens living in France, you cannot say that this is a democratic state.
The Israeli law is the same. The Israeli law is the same on properties, on religion, and they protect either you respect or you believe or not to a religion or not.
All right, we're going to talk when we come back about this issue of the
religion at all.
Shlomo Sand. We have to take, unfortunately, Shlomo Sand. Unfortunately, we have to take a very quick break. When we come back, we're going to take a look again at the fact that right up till this crisis erupted, the beginning of this week, it's only Monday that it erupted in full. Arab Israelis were set to play kingmaker. We'll talk about it when we come back. You're watching the France 24 debate. Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. It's the France 24 debate. We're seeing how there's been a new layer of uncertainty in the spiral witnessed in Israel. First, it was clashes in East Jerusalem, or the standoff in East Jerusalem, if you will, over the eviction of Palestinian families there. Then we saw the beginnings of a border war with Gaza, and for the second night in a row, we had clashes which hadn't been seen in decades between Israeli Arabs and Jews. We're talking about it with lawyer and commentator Pascal Markovitz. Also with us from Haifa, northern Israel, activist Hayam Tanus is with us, and she is with the advocacy group Women Wage Peace. And from Tel Aviv, historian Shlomo Sand, professor emeritus at Tel Aviv University. On Wednesday, the Israeli prime minister calling in unambiguous terms on both sides to tone it down.
To all Israeli citizens, I say it doesn't matter to me if your blood is boiling. You can't take the law into your own hands. You can't take an ordinary Arab citizen and lynch him. Nothing justifies the lynching of Arabs by Jews, and nothing justifies the lynching of Jews by Arabs. It's unacceptable.
Hayam Tanus, your reaction?
The problem is that Mr. Netanyahu's policy for decades was, dividing and splitting between the Arabs and the Jewish people for our misfortune. I think that a leader should gather people together and not split them. And this is why I think there is a very complexity in the situation, and we, the Arabs over here, we feel that we are the illegitimate child of the country. Mr. Netanyahu also now he has a trial which he has, to deal with, and I think that this is why also we are escalating the problem with the Hamas, because United States and Egypt asked him to cease fire, but he wants to go on because as a sovereign state, I think he wanted to come back when he will succeed and we will end the problem. But I think he will never ever end the problem, because Hamas, who feels that he is under occupation, he wants his freedom. And whenever there is no freedom in Gaza Strip or in the Palestinian Authority, I think we are going to come back and we will have fights over here, because the people needs their freedom. And Rivlin knows that if the Jewish people have to survive here in the Middle East, in the Arab world, they have to make compromises, they have to sit together, they have to talk. And I think this is what we are doing, Women Wage Peace. We are 50,000 women, and I think we are the hope of Israel, because we are the people who are thinking, and we are doing everything in order to influence both leaders to sit down and have a peaceful agreement, the equal agreement that both of the leaders will sign on it. I think here, if now, while the Israel government is strong, and now they give their hand to the Palestinian people and they tell them, we are neighbors, let's sit and talk, I think here there will be explosions every 10 years. Because as you see, every 10 years we have a war. And now even this Keeper's Gate, I think this new operation, I think it's deja vu. It's as 2014. I think we saw that what happened. We saw the casualties. We saw the bloodshed, the circle, the violence, the bombs, the rockets flying over here and there. The mother crying and weeping over their children. This is why Women Wage Peace are doing their best in order. We want to give life to our kids. We want to heal our country.
All right, let's talk about that. You're saying we need to break this endless cycle, and it seemed as though we were on the cusp of a new chapter in Israeli politics after that record fourth general election in 2 years. Inconclusive result once again, and we had these negotiations where again Arab Israelis appeared poised to play a kingmaker. A few reactions from earlier in the day. Opposition leader Yair Lapid who's now tasked, by the way, with forming a government after March elections. He has till June the 12th, I believe. He said, quote, "The rioters in Lod and Akka do not represent Israeli Arabs. The rioters in Bat Yam do not represent Israeli Jews." And a similar tone from Mansour Abbas. He is the leader of the conservative United Arab List, which has been courted by both sides. He spoke earlier to Israeli military radio, and he said the following: "I am not going to give up on future cooperation. It could be that these incidents emphasize the need for true partnership with understanding, initiating together." Pascal Markovitz, are you surprised? Here's the leader of this conservative Arab-Israeli party who's saying, no, negotiations are still on. The political process of trying to form a government, it can continue.
I think so. And I hope this war will end very quickly, because the problem is from Gaza. From Gaza, the Hamas is governing Gaza. So why do they launch missiles, more than 1,000 in 2 days? What's the problem? They are governing Gaza, so people in Gaza are not subjected to the Israeli law. So it's only in order to make the naval war, which Mrs. Tanus said, it's only to leave the Jews to the sea, from the river to the sea. And we can also see in some French medias some pro-Palestinian organizations saying that the Palestine land should be only an Arab land and not Israeli land. So,
but that's not what Mansour Abbas is. That's not what he's saying. Is he a man that either Benjamin Netanyahu or Yair Lapid can do business with?
I think so. Why not? People who are elected in the Knesset are, I said, good people who want to negotiate because they know that the only goal and purpose is to negotiate. And I think it's very right.
Shlomo Saad, your thoughts?
You know, I'm hearing the discussion. I myself, we try to understand why this alienation of the Israeli Arabs before the Israeli state. This alienation, I think it becomes deeper and deeper because they become more and more Israelis. Now, it's very important to understand that the fact that they are influenced by the Hamas is the reason not because Hamas is very clever. You know, unfortunately, Gaza is dominated by the Hamas, and the young Arabs around me started to admire this resistance, because they think that Abu Mazen doesn't resist really against the Israeli occupation. And unfortunately, they admire more and more the Hamas. Now, about Mansour Abbas, I think that he's playing like a good politician, or a Jewish politician, if you want, playing very, very interesting with the right wing of the government of Israel. Now, we have to understand that Mansour Abbas is a Muslim, very, very, very Muslim, against gays, against all the liberal culture.
Conservative.
This is Mansour Abbas. Not only conservative, it's more than conservative, a religious conservative. Now, why he has influence about the Arab-Israeli society, apart because he has not the majority, because you see, today I see around me a lot of young Arabs, they become more and more Muslims because they don't have an alternative. Now, we have to understand, Israel declares himself as a democratic state, but we have to know that in Israel, a Jew cannot marry the Arab, and an Arab woman cannot marry the Jew, because there is not civic marriages in Israel. It was decided in 48, 49, not
like
today.
in other countries.
If you want...
in a lot of countries.
Sorry? I don't know a democratic liberal country that Christian cannot marry the Jews. Imagine that tomorrow United States will decide that a Jew cannot marry the Christian. This is Israel. We have to understand why this alienation of the young Arabs all around, why they are continuing to hear Hamas. after Abu Mazen failed to liberate the occupied territories.
Because you
we
think...
are dominate 53 years, we are dominate occupied territories without any political rights of a few millions of people. Now, last sentence, Gaza, this, how we say, thinking about Gaza, I'm sitting now in Tel Aviv. I will not forget that 70% of the people living in Gaza are refugees that came from here, from Jaffa, from Ashkelon, Majdal. 70% of the people living in Gaza are families that went away from here, from Jaffa to Gaza, leaving 2 million people in a very, 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 very little area. And they are thinking that one day they will come back to Jaffa, to Migdal, and elsewhere. Now, I don't think that they will come back, and this is one of the reasons that I'm against Hamas. But we have to think that there will not be a solution without confronting ourselves with this deep situation that we are living. I want that the Israeli state will continue to exist, but I think that the chance that Israel will exist if Israel will become a state of all its Israeli citizens and not the state of the Jews in the world. By the way,
Israeli citizens, but they are all Israeli citizens.
All the respect to Woody Allen. Sorry?
It's not only Jews.
Sorry?
All right, it's not just Jews, says Pascal Markovitz. You're saying it's all Israeli citizens.
Yes.
Disagreement on that point. Let me bring in Hayam. Let me just bring in for a second because we're short on time. Let me bring in Hayam Tanus on this because I just want to first of all hear. Again, I go back to those reactions we saw from Yair Lapid, from Benjamin Netanyahu, and from Mansour Abbas. Do you think that after things calm down, and I hope they do fast, that a coalition government can be formed? It can be business as usual?
I pray for that.
Yes, maybe, but for a short time.
One at a time. Hayam Tanus.
I pray for that. You know, we had a sparkling moment when Mansour Abbas said that he brought a new voice, a new vision, a vision of coexistence, a vision of peace, security, tolerance, and inclusiveness. But for our misfortune, I don't say most of the Arab majority who till now, as my friend said about the alienation which was, and because 70 years of feeling, you know, the stepchild of the country, it's not easy for us to make, you know, this coalition in one moment. I think that to have war, it needs one moment, but to have real peace, we need time and process. I think that the new voice and the new discourse of Mansour Abbas is awakening plenty of Arab people, Palestinian Arabs, who are thinking like him, but they can't say that because we also are thinking all the time about our brothers in Palestine, and we want them to be free over there. So we can't make a normalization before that the occupation will stop.
No, I'm sorry, but
the Arab-Israeli people, we are living in a conflict because we want to stay here in Israel because we love this country. From the other side, we want that our brothers have their freedom, and this is why we are in. But when Mansour Abbas said and say, put aside the political situation, I want to solve the civil problems of my people. I think all of us we agree that this is what we need. First of all, to solve our problems here, and then to be a bridge between us and the Palestinians.
Pascal Markovitz, your thoughts?
I'm sorry, but Mrs. Tanus said that the Palestinian Arabs are in Israel. Palestinian Arabs are governed by the Palestinian Authority, by a man, Mahmoud Abbas, Abu Mazen, who denied the elections for 15 years. So we didn't have any democratic elections under the Palestinian Authority for 15 years. Is it democratic? I don't think so. So I think the elections shouldn't be reported as he decided, and perhaps the situation would be more, as we say, calm. It's not the situation. So I think both the Hamas and both the Palestinian Authority are guilty in this process for the war.
All right, and this chance of a civil war inside of Israel, is it real?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so because people are intelligent, people are very clever, and they know that it's incidents, I think. And people, well, I think you always have extremists from both sides, of course, in every country. Yes. But they are not the majority. The majority, it's like, for example, in Haifa or in Akko or in Lod, people are living together, trading together, and I think it will be good in a few days.
But passion's running high, by the way. Passion's running high, not just inside of Israel. Every time that we see this, we see the world over. People get very impassioned on both sides of this argument. And sometimes we do have extremists here in Europe. Germany's leading Jewish group has sharply condemned protests in front of a synagogue in the western city of Gelsenkirchen as pure anti-Semitism. There have been incidences in several other German cities, including Berlin, Hamburg, and Hanover over the past few days. 2 synagogues attacked, several Israeli flags torn down in places and burned in places like Bonn and Munster. Here in France, the Interior Minister banning demonstrations scheduled for Saturday. Gérald Darmanin saying, I've asked the police superintendent to ban this because serious incidents of public unrest were noted in 2014. Orders have been given to be particularly firm and vigilant. So here's the problem, Pascal Markovitz.
Yes.
On the one hand, you can follow his argument and say, to be cautious, let's just not have a demonstration. On the other hand, it looks very much like taking sides for one side instead of the other if you're not allowing people to voice their support for the Palestinian cause.
I think it's not a problem of being one side or to another side. It's a being of trouble for the public. The problem is that a lot of pro-Palestinian organizations in France, they want to import the Israeli-Palestinian conflict in France and in Europe, and they are making demonstrations which are not only to support a cause, which is the Palestinian cause, which is legitimated, okay. We are in France, in a democratic country. We can be for or against a government. It's not a problem. The problem is, and we heard about this, and we saw it. Every time we had demonstrations.
But we also have hardline pro-Israel organizations like the...
You didn't have any problems with...
I've seen them before myself, these people.
Yes, but you didn't have one problem from a pro-Israeli organization making a demonstration in France, but you have several problems with pro-Palestinian organizations making their demonstrations. For example, it was near La Roquette and the La Roquette synagogue near the Bastille Quarter in Paris during the last war. In
2014.
Yeah, 2014. And it's always the same problem. So I think it's a good decision made by the Minister of Interior.
Shlomo Sand, I know France is part of your research. Your thoughts on this?
See, really, really deeply, I don't want that the Jews in France will live like the Arabs in Israel. Really, deeply. I think that the Jews in France, with all the expression of anti-Semitism, are living very good. This is the reason that they are not coming to Israel. It's very, very near. It's not very, very far. Now, most of my friends, Jewish origin, France, prefer to live in France as equal French citizens. Now, I repeat deeply, it's unbelievable from this kind of pro-Zionist living in Paris or in London or in New York. They don't want that the Arab Israeli will live in Israel like they live in New York. They live in Paris. It's unbelievable. You know, every Jews that I know, in me myself, we have a double nationality. I am I have an Israeli nationality, and I have a French nationality. The Israeli Arabs cannot have a double nationality. Now, I am living in a state that a third of the population in the capital of the state has not any political right. I cannot understand that somebody that came from Jewish, history, I cannot accept it that 350,000 people living in my capital without any political right.
Which
the
is
Jews
completely
in
false.
Paris are not living this situation. Sorry?
This is completely false.
I didn't hear.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Mr. Sand. This is completely false because Arabs can
300,
vote. They have health security.
I will not let it.
They have jobs and everything. So this is completely false.
But there's the 350,000 who live in East Jerusalem.
350,000. Sorry, 350,000 people, Arab people living in El-Quds, Jerusalem, a part of Israel. Most of them were born in the Israeli state, has not Israeli citizenship, not any political right, not any civic right. And you are speaking about the Jewish democracy? This is the Jewish democracy. I hope that the Jews in Paris will not live like Arabs in Jerusalem. This is the reason of the conflict. And I'm afraid that tomorrow it will be worse, because it's true that most of the Arabs, like most of the Jews, don't like violence. People don't like violence. I'm sure about it.
All right,
but violence will become more and more, again and again, if we will not be with the concept, the democratic concept of equality between the citizens.
Unfortunately, we're out of Shlomo Sand. Unfortunately, we're out of time. Much more to say on this topic and on the future of the status of all citizens, both in Israel, the Palestinian territories, and in Jerusalem itself. I want to thank you. I want to thank Hayam Tanus for being with us from the northern city of Haifa. Pascal Markovitz, thank you for joining us here in the France 24 debate.